Since I do have power going to the motor, coming from the 24 volt secondary winding of the main power transformer, I know that the winding is not the problem. And I have operated the motor, I've seen the motor work, so I know the motor is functional. So those two fundamentals I can take out of the troubleshooting picture now. But what I'm still getting is intermittent ability to move the dial across to move the needle across the dial using the motor when it's in the electric tuning mode. So the gear works, I think, are fine too, because when I put it to manual tuning mode, I can tune it myself very easily by hand. So what I think I have happening is that some reason there's a stop in there, some kind of, because I get this problem mostly when it gets to one end of the dial or the other. There is a stop function. And that stop function is obviously to prevent the motor from overrunning and overdriving and tearing up the gears. And then at the same time that it stops the dial needle from moving to one side or the other, there is a reversing switch right here that I took it off of this thing. A reversing switch that sits right on the back of the the preset assembly. Now, excuse me. The way this reversing switch works, when the tuning is operating, this whole preset mechanism with all these discs, it turns on a shaft, and that shaft also turns this lever. It looks, I call it a cam. It's like a cam operator, but it turns this lever. This lever rotates, and if you look at this switch, okay, this switch is mounted on there like so, and that lever operates this switch. See? Now this switch has 4 terminals. 3 of the terminals we're concerned with right now. So if you take a look up here, there you have it. There's the switch. I've numbered them. Those are my numbers, 1, 2, 3, and 4, just so that I could kind of keep track of the wires. When I pulled the wires off, I numbered them as well. Those wires go up here to the motor, and this is the part I don't quite understand yet, but I don't feel like I need to. I'm okay with that. I'll sort that out in a little while. But what I need to know, what I have sorted out, is that the various resistances across certain points on that motor assembly are what they need to be. Because if I look over here at this schematic, it also represents the motor and the reversing switch. You see the switch there, S9. Well, those resistances that are shown, 16.8 ohms, 1.05 ohms, there are a couple of other measurements that I've seen in other places. Those resistances I'm coming very close to when I take measurements. So I don't think I have any issues going on in here as far as open windings or anything like that. I think my issue is mechanical or electromechanical. One of the features of this, and I don't know, there's one of those coils, let me point that out. In this diagram, this coil right here is a coil that drives it's like a solenoid that drives the shaft forward or backward. And there's a reason for that. So that coil is buried inside of the motor here, and here's the armature, and you see the armature has what looks like an awful lot of play, but it's not play. It's designed that way because at the other end of the armature are these sets of reed switches, these fingers. You see them moving. And at the very end of the shaft, you can see that there is a pin put in the shaft. You see that? That pin that moves when I move the shaft? Well, that pin, let me get where I can get a hold of it. This is hard to do, guys. My fingers aren't quite doing what they need to do. All right, that pin, there we go. As soon as it moves enough, it'll focus. Okay, you see that pin at the end of the shaft? That pin drives a little tang on the end of the tuning mechanism and the part of the clockwork down here. And you can see that You know, that pin will drive this guy, which then drives the whole tuning arrangement. Okay, so what I think is happening, there's a couple things happening. That solenoid is supposed to move this shaft into position so that it can actually drive it, and then when you reach the stop, I think it pulls it out. That way it can swing around and operate it from the other direction when the reversing switch changes directions. Okay, so it only pushes that tang on the tuning, it pushes that tang from one side or the other. And so I think what I have here is maybe an intermittent switch, reversing switch, S9. Maybe those fingers are causing problems. Actually, those fingers, all they do, by the way, is defeat the automatic frequency control and defeat the audio. So all they just eliminate issues that would occur as you're tuning across the band. You know, the sound you would hear, and imagine the action of the AFC. So I'm not terribly concerned about those, but what I am concerned about is this reversing switch. Where in the heck did I put it? This reversing switch. It's a simple enough switch, but what I have noted, before I cleaned it with the oxide, I have noted that this switch, when it's up, when I go back and forth, it sometimes doesn't change position. It doesn't make up contact when I move it, unless I let it hit pretty hard like that. If it moves slow, and just barely toggles over, slow. See, now it's not wanting to do it that way since I cleaned it. But anyway, when it did that very slowly, sometimes it wouldn't change position. It was like it wasn't making contact on the other set. I'm not quite sure, and I can't take it apart. It's all riveted together, and I imagine that this thing is made of unobtainium. So I'm not going to take this apart. I'm just going to hope I can get it clean enough and make it work. Okay, so I imagine there's like a carbon contact in there at the end of this spring that moves back and forth between two other contacts. But in any event, I'm hoping the cleaning does it. I cleaned it with contact cleaner very heavily, practically bathed it in it. And then I let that dry very thoroughly and operated it, did it again, did the same thing again. And then I went through a couple iterations of deoxit, and that was last night, and that was the last thing I did with this switch. So I'm going to mess with that in a bit. I'm going to test that switch out. But what else might be going on, I'm not sure. It could be that some of the mechanicals are a little bit sticky too, but boy, everything seems to move freely. I don't see any issues there. When I turn this with my finger, this tunes very easily. So I'll have to chase that down, guys. I don't really know. But what I'm going to do is, take it apart. Not too far, just take it apart and see what I can see. Clean everything. Check and make sure everything looks good. Make sure there's no bad contacts or anything like that. No bad solder joints and that kind of junk. And put it back together and hope I get lucky here. I don't really know. I mean, it's simple enough arrangement. Even if I don't quite understand the wiring of the motor, it's a simple enough arrangement that it should be easy to make it work. So I'm going to keep after that. Really, to bore you to death with listening to me troubleshoot it isn't going to help you, because I'm not that fast at that. It'll take me some time. But when I do figure it out, I will go over it with you. Even if, again, if I don't understand every detail, there will be those of you out there who are smarter than me and will be able to understand every detail. But I can tell you what I found. And after reporting what I found, you may see the same thing in the radio you're doing. So I'll get to it, and I'll let you know what I come up with. When you look at the front side of the 811K, and the 812K is the same, by the way. There are a couple of controls that you might want to note, and I'll point those out to you right now. This here is the tuning mode switch. It's a 3-position switch. 1, 2, 3. In this position here, in this third position where the lever is vertical, that is manual tuning. So when I have that on manual tuning, there is absolutely no electric drive operating at all, and they're not connected together. It's not connected to the electric drive. So it's very easy to turn. When I operate this switch or this lever, to electric tuning, then what it does is it engages that electric drive, and you hear that. That's the gear reduction, trying to turn the motor and the presets and all that, when really it's supposed to be driven from the motor end, but I'm trying to drive it from the tuning knob end. And what's really curious about this whole arrangement is when it's tuning, the knob is spinning. It's kind of a cool thing to watch. I've seen a couple of these working, and they're really neat. Okay, so that is electric tuning, the preset tuning, push button tuning is what I should be saying. So when it's set in this middle position, you're operating these push buttons, okay? And you see that there is a catch right here that releases the button that was engaged when you push a new button in. Okay, and like most push button tuning, you can release the whole assembly a lot of times by just pushing the button part way in and releasing the catch. Now there are preset buttons on this side too, and the two catches are connected together. See? You see them both move. So there are 8 presets on this radio, and if you look back here, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 discs. Each one of those discs enables you to program in one station. The user manual that came with this radio, and I have a copy of it, explains how to set those, and it required a special tool, so I'm going to see if I can't make something, but right now I'm not going to concern myself with that. What I am going to concern myself with is how to get that motor to drive the tuning properly in the first place. Like I said, I've seen it works this way and then stop and not go back this way. I've seen it go back this way, stop and not go back. And I've also seen it stop at presets along the way. So I know that those presets are working because it stops at presets along the way. When I operate this mode switch, the lights do change, so all of that's working. Now, what I didn't tell you was this first position with the lever at approximately 30 degrees from the horizontal on the left. That is the remote control preset tuning. That, in other words, that you got a box, like a magic tuning box that you had at your armchair. I think they called it armchair control. And it basically had the same function that these 8 buttons do. That was about it. So you plug that into this thing, you put it on this switch position, and then you could use the armchair, but I don't believe these would work in that case. And then light changes for that as well. So there's this middle one, of course, is the tuning. I haven't sorted out yet every detail of what's going on with all of these. Let's see, this I believe is the band switch, but I'm not sure. I haven't really, I've spent so much time on this silly motor that I haven't gotten everything down. I guess what I should have said in the beginning was I wanted to point out to you how this mode switch works for the electric tuning. That way, when I'm operating it, while we're looking at the back side of the radio, when I'm operating it, this is the one I'm operating. When you'll see the light change from here to here, then you know that that switch is the one I'm operating. Okay, I'll get back to work. One thing I know for sure is that when you look at the motor, the winding for the motor, not for the solenoid section, when it's running one direction, it looks like you apply the 24 volts. When it's running one direction, this black lead is connected to the A point. You see this here, the black lead is the center of the rocker of that switch. And in one position it's connected to the black with the red tracer. In the other position it's connected to the red with the black. And you can see here they are. One is black with the red tracer is on this side here. Red and black is on this side. So I've been experimenting. So I found the black the black lead right here, and I've connected a gator wire to that black lead. That's number 3 on the switch, as you saw in the drawing. The first thing I'm going to do is connect it to the position number 2, and that is this one right here. Now it looks yellow, but it's really red with black. That what looks yellow is just faded red. Okay, so let me connect that up. So what we're going to see now, what I expect to see, is that the motor will run in one direction. And we'll be able to tell that by looking right down here at the direction that that shaft and that little pin turns. Okay, so right now the way I'm going to do this, I'll demonstrate it before I put power to it, is if you look real carefully, it's hard to see because cameras, you know, we can put people on space shuttles. We can't get cameras that focus. I don't get it. But if you look real closely at this, you see this is basically two strips with an insulating layer in between. So if I jump across those two strips, it's just like closing this push button switch, okay? So you'll see when with power to the motor and I close this, that pin will turn a certain way. Let me find it here. That pin will turn a certain way. So it's going to be hard to see both, but I'll try, okay? I got to do all this without getting myself shocked. So first things first, let's put about 110 to 115 volts on the thing. See the lights coming up. So great. About 117 volts. Now, if you can see right down there that pin, while I jump her across this, you'll see what happens. See? It's turning counterclockwise. Okay, now I'm going to take this 24 volts AC, and now I'm going to put it on the other side. Okay, that's the other side. Now I'll do the same thing and see if you can see which direction that pin is turning. See, that's turning clockwise. Okay, so the motor will reverse directions based on the position of that switch, just as it's supposed to. And one more thing, watch that armature shaft, what happens. Okay, so it does, and that's true in both directions. That armature shaft will move in. So let's connect back over here. And let's see. That unpleasant sound you're hearing happens to be that I believe that the gear drive is jumping some teeth, and we have some worn teeth. I've got to work on that. I don't have any idea what I'm going to do about that, by the way. So, see, when it turns one direction, however, it turns fairly smoothly. Watch the needle. Watch the tuning needle if you can see it move. See that? Now if I make it go the other direction, you'll see that tuning needle move the other direction. That needle hanger move the other direction. See, but you see how it appears to be slipping, so I don't want to do it too much more. So it's pretty clear to me. It's pretty clear to me that everything electrically is working as it should. Except maybe that switch, because right now I am performing the role of the switch by gator wiring. Except for that reversing switch, which I have to check out, everything else seems to be working as it should. But what I'm having is in that clockwork somewhere. In that clockwork, and there's a bunch of gears. I got some what seemed like stripped teeth. Now I've noticed when it's turning, that big gear right in the center of the picture there, that turns off that little pinion gear, and that little pinion gear, it seems to be slipping. That little pinion gear will turn, and the big gear moves sporadically and going in one direction, moves smoothly in the other. Well, that big gear is coupled directly to the tuning shaft, the manual shaft. The knob is connected to. That's a little bit harder to turn than I think it should be. It may be that once I clean all that up and make it easy to turn, lubricate it properly, that this thing will actually move smoothly. It may not work perfectly because it does have damaged teeth. There's nothing I can do about that, but it will maybe at least move smoothly. We'll see. You know, I also noticed that at the end of travel, if you'll see right directly in front of the tuning condenser, the rotor of the tuning condenser, right in front of that right there, you can see that half gear. You see it's flat on the top, but it's those double gears that are always coupled together with a spring so that that takes up the slippage or the hysteresis. Well, that double gear at one end, and you can kind of see it, has got a really worn spot because that's the place it stops, and if the motor stop isn't working just right, it'll tear the snot out of those few teeth right there at the end. That's causing problems, and I don't know if I can do anything about that or not. However, if I lubricate everything and everything's working as smoothly as it can, that issue may go away somewhat. So we're going to give it a try. But little by little, I'm working through this tuning mechanism, and I think I'm getting it sorted out. So it's coming up on about 11 o'clock at night, and I got to be to work at 4:30 in the morning. So, and I've been we've got a sick person in the house I've been taking care of too. So I'm cashed, guys. I'm gonna quit for the night. So that's all for now.